than you are in Australia right now.
You're talking NBA basketball. You're talking great teams. You're talking great individual players.
Takes it off, and there's number 23, and of course Johnny goes nuts.
So I'll get goosebumps thinking about it now.
I just tried to go out there and play my game.
I have no idea what you're talking about, Adam. I don't like anybody. I'm not a people person.
Strand, you make the pass, yes. Christian, can you catch the ball? Yes.
All the stars were aligned and all the muscles fired at the right time, and I was able to get off the ground and throw one down.
I was saving that as a surprise for you.
And now, introducing your host for In All Airness, Adam Ryan.
Welcome to episode 4. Thanks for joining me. Go to inallairness.com for show notes and plenty more features. The social hub for the podcast is facebook.com/inallairness. If you haven't already, please like the page and join the growing community of fans. Add the podcast to your RSS feed or iTunes so you never miss another show. It's also available on Stitcher, BlackBerry, Player FM, TuneIn Radio, and numerous other podcatchers. I love hearing from listeners. On either site, you can send voicemail comments or questions. With your permission, I'd love to include your feedback on future episodes. You can follow me on Twitter @InAllAirness. My guest today has made a name for himself in the USA, across Europe and beyond. He represented Australia at numerous Olympics and had the honour of being flag bearer and team captain at Sydney 2000. The tag greatest basketballer Australia's ever produced may not sit too comfortably on his shoulders, but without his contribution to the game, it wouldn't be where it is today. Andrew Gaze, thanks for joining me.
No problem at all. It's a pleasure.
Now, I'm not trying to embarrass you to start off with here, but just to give the listeners some perspective about the introduction, I just want to quickly reel off a few incredible career achievements. Firstly, here in Australia, 612 NBL games played, Rookie of the Year, 2 NBL Championships with a career average over 30 points a game, 7 MVP awards, and you were named the greatest player of the first 25 NBL seasons. Then, your international career. You played almost 300 games for Australia, captained Australia from 1993 through to 2000. You played for Seton Hall in the 1989 NCAA Championship game, played in Italy and Greece, suited up for the Washington Bullets, and then some years later were a member of the NBA Champion, San Antonio Spurs, and played at 4 World Championships and also 5 Olympic Games. Now, looking back on your career, can you even imagine that would have transpired in that time?
No, not at all. It's you always start out as a youngster hoping for the best, and I guess being born into an environment where I was surrounded by the sport because of what my father's occupation. My dad was the general manager of Basketball Victoria, and this is from the early 60s. And what happened is that they had this new facility that was going to be the home of the sport, not just for Victoria, but really for Australia here in Melbourne. It was at Albert Park. There was these old army warehouse storage facilities that were being converted, no longer required, and they were being converted to sport. And one of these storage facilities was allocated to basketball. Another one was to badminton. Another one was to squash. And subsequently, in that precinct where these buildings were, they built a squash court as well, so squash centre as well. So my dad, being the general manager of Basketball Victoria, in their wisdom, when they were converting these stadiums into sport, the basketball decided to build a little manager's residence. There was this little cottage that was built wedged between the badminton and the basketball, and that's where the manager of that facility lived. And so from the time I was born to the time I was 13 or 14, I lived in this pretty unique environment where I had a 9-court basketball stadium in my backyard, and also got to dabble with all these other sports in this precinct. So that, combined with the expertise of my dad being the coach of a player and a coach of the Australian national team, gave me, I think, probably a significant advantage over many of my peers, because of the environment that I was growing up in, that just enabled me to play whenever I wanted to play, and in many instances was forced to play because, I was living in this environment where I was exposed to basketball on a daily basis. So I was lucky enough to develop the skills and have the guidance of my parents that taught me the game and gave me an understanding of all those types of how you need to play and conduct yourself, that I think enabled me to go on and play elite basketball.
Excellent. Definitely a very unique setup when you're growing up, no doubt. Just before we do delve into your early career, Andrew, now that you mentioned your dad, of course, Lindsay, who's very famous and well known around the world in basketball circles himself, it seems it took him a bit of time to be convinced to become involved with basketball in the first place. Is it possible to put into words perhaps the role that your family, but particularly your dad, played throughout your storied career?
Oh, it's immeasurable. It was one of those things without his guidance and motivation, and probably even more importantly, his knowledge of the game and how to teach the game, then I have no doubt that I would not have been able to play at any level. I wasn't an individual that was necessarily blessed with great athleticism or those types of things, or physical attributes that you'd look at and identify and say, gee, there's the raw materials to make something reasonable happen. But I think he not only was what I was able to do with me personally in teaching me the game and giving me an understanding of it, but what he did for the sport here in Victoria and right throughout Australia in administratively developing the game, developing field facilities, those types of things, setting up competitions, every aspect of the game. He was significantly involved in, and the influence that he had on me, and I'd say many, many others, is immeasurable.
Yeah, no doubt. Now, sorry about the phone ringing there. Obviously, a few people want to have a chat to you today. Now, the Andrew Gaze story, the book I was talking about that I read in preparation for our chat today, it's an excellent read, and it's filled with your sense of humour and talent, how it is nature that you're well known for here in Australia. Speaking about your athleticism there, or perhaps lack of, as you say, the phone's gone again, they love it. I just need to ask you right off the bat about a huge dunk that you threw down on an unsuspecting Geelong Supercats player back in the NBL, around 92, 93. You know the dunk I'm referring to?
I certainly do, and unlike many of the baskets that I shot throughout my NBL career, very few of them were actually dunks. There was probably, in 600 and whatever games it was, there might have been probably across them all 20 or 30 dunks. Yeah. So there was not a lot of athleticism in that area of the game shown. But I remember that one because it was at Geelong and we weren't going particularly well. It was a struggle of a game, and coming down, and Leonard Copeland was running down the right side, and normally I was, just going to throw it up there, and fortunately playing alongside a superstar like Leonard Copeland who had freakish athleticism, you just throw the ball anywhere near the backboard and he'd go get it.
Sure.
But on this occasion, Darren Rowe was the player that was running back on this 2-on-1 situation, and I don't know what come over me. I thought, I just might go up here and have a crack at this, and all the stars were aligned and all the muscles fired at the right time, and I was able to get off the ground and throw one down. So I think to me, I thought, oh yeah, I've dunked it. I didn't think it was too much of a big deal, but judging by the reaction of my teammates, Leonard in particular and Mark Bradkey, they sort of looked at me as if something extraordinary happened, and I, at the time, couldn't really understand. I was psyched, pumped because I got the 2 points and it was a dunk, but I didn't really realise until that night. Fortunately, it was a Channel 10 game, and went back and I saw a replay and I thought, oh, gee, that's not too bad for me.
Yeah, not bad at all. That's understudy. I think was it Stephen Quartermain that was calling the game at that time? I'm not sure. I think it was. It
was him, it's Stephen Quartermain and Dean Templeton.
Yes. I think Quartermain was going to say, here's an alley-oop to Copeland. He was pretty much used to saying that. And then all of a sudden, you've just gone straight down the lane and jammed it in, Darren Rowe's face, as you said. So crazy dunk, but one of the favourite things I've seen you do in your career, to be honest.
Yeah. I think they felt a bit sorry for him because back then, Channel 10, they had a show, a magazine type show that they used to do in conjunction with covering the games, and they had their top players of the week, and I think it might have been the top player of the week. But at the end of the year, they had their top 10 dunks, and I think it was they put it as the number 2 dunk of the year, which it really wasn't. But I think just for surprise value, they gave it to me. They ranked me to number 2.
No, it's pretty awesome. It's probably a name that most people wouldn't maybe expect in the top 10 dunk list, but still it's very, very impressive, no doubt. In your formative years of playing basketball, it seemed clear that you obviously loved the sport. You were brought up around basketball and played numerous games a week and also competed in divisions well above your age at the time. Can you just talk about the formative years and playing against these older and stronger opponents and how it actually did help your game?
Yeah, because of the nature of where I lived, from the time I can't even really remember the official time when I started actually playing, but even going back to when I was 6 or 7 and I was in grade 1, I was playing with the grade 6s because back then, not a lot of people even knew the rules of the game or knew much about it, and I could at least dribble and shoot the ball. So
yep. I
was always at school. The teacher would say, "What sports do you play?" You put your hand up and you say basketball, and literally, half the class wouldn't even know what it was. They'd think it's they'd heard it netball, bit of a sissy sport, all those types of things. So that it was a little unusual to be focusing on basketball in the schoolyard environment, but because of the housing and where we lived, regularly I'd be just wandering around the courts at night, and there'd be a team that were short a player and they needed someone in order not to give a walkover, and they'd see me hanging around and they'd say, "Hey, can you come and help us out and jump on the court and have a game?" Yeah. And when you're young and 11, 12, even 13, and you're in that type of situation where you're up against men, and quite often they were older men, who weren't necessarily skilled playing recreational basketball on a Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday night. I'd always just jump in there and do what I can, and you learn about how to look after yourself. You learn a lot about what's going to upset your opposition, and a lot of the time there was a lot of self-preservation going on because nicest people can get some white line fever, and when you're a youngster out there that's knocking down shots or doing that type of stuff, the competitive instincts kick in, and sometimes it was a little intimidating. But and the same would apply on junior competitions. When I was under 12s and under 14s, we'd play our games. The younger kids would play earlier. And I'd hang out at the stadium because my dad was coaching at the various levels, and if the under 14s, 16s, 18s were missing players in any of the grades, that I'd always be hanging around and be more than willing to jump on a court and help them out. So when I look back on it, I think that was really the area that gave me, I think, a bit of an advantage because I played so much. Many of the teams would just, even the junior teams would play once a week and maybe at best train twice a week. But with all the games that I was playing, and particularly against bigger bodies and older people, I think that really fast-tracked some of my development. For sure.
But in the first 3 or 4 years of the NBL career, playing for your beloved Melbourne Tigers, you put up some amazing individual numbers and were a staple atop the year-end scoring lists. So individual success was not a problem. But can you perhaps just discuss for a moment the team at that time and some of the on-court struggles for success?
Yeah, the league was going through this radical change of the professionalism coming into the game in all aspects, but probably most significantly in that players were actually becoming more professional and getting paid to play. Yeah. And for us, the Melbourne Tigers, despite our long history in Australian basketball, in fact, the oldest club in Australia, we never actually entered into the NBL until 1984. And prior to that, and the league was started in 1979, and prior to that, we played in the next level. Back in 81 and 82, the difference between the other league, which at the time was called the SEC, the Southeastern Conference, it's gone on to have many different name changes. Today it's referred to as the SEABL.
Yes.
But back then it was called the SEC. And the difference between the NBL and the SEC wasn't as significant as it is now. So in 81, 82 and 83, we were playing in, the Melbourne Tigers were playing in that league and had teams from New South Wales and Tasmania and South Australia were in that league as well.
Yeah.
And, playing in there, we were always very strong. We were runner-up in 1982. We won it in 1983. And in 1984, we went on and joined and transferred over and joined the NBL. And I don't know, I can't remember if it was just a coincidence or part of the process, but in 1982, Geelong won the Southeastern Conference, the SEC, and they then graduated to the NBL. In that was in 81, and in 82, the Frankston Bears won the SEABL, and they graduated into the NBL. And subsequently, in 83, we won it, and we moved on. Now, I don't know whether that's just a coincidence or back then there might have been some process of promotion.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, in 84 was our first year in the NBL, but we were still rank amateurs. No one on the team was getting paid. And back then we had guys like Brian Gorgian and Bruce Palmer, Al Westover were some of my teammates. And in 84 we were okay without being great. We got off to a real slow start. And I think, in fact, Brian Gorgian might have missed the start of the 84 season because he was thinking about retiring and then decided to play with us. And we started terribly but finished strong. And I think we might have just missed out on the playoffs in 84. But then after that, with the professionalism in the sport, we lost a few players. You know, they were going elsewhere where they could get paid.
Yeah.
And as such, in 85, 86, 87, we were still 100% rank amateurs, and we were getting destroyed. We'd only win 3 games, 4 games, 2. We were really not very good, and it was kind of a hard pill to swallow because even back then, like you mentioned, I was putting up some decent numbers individually, but because you're losing all the time, sort of lost a bit of relevance. But I think that you're young and you're just competing, and you're not worried about the other elements. You're not getting paid. You don't. The obligations of being a professional athlete weren't the same. So, although it's bothering, you sort of can, you get through it all. But then in after the 87 season, in 1988, we got some benefactors to help the club out and administratively to make some changes and provide some resources. And in 88, we were, started to get some, I guess, expense money. But then in 1989, we were heading towards being more professional. And 89 is when I think we recruited Dave Colbert and Dave Simmons. And from that point on, we were again one of the more stronger teams in the competition. But that period, from 85 to even 88 we were okay. I think we won 8 or 9 games, but so in that period there, it was pretty tough going.
Yeah, no, definitely. But I suppose it's good to have at least built up from being, as you said, the rank amateurs to then develop the club, and it makes it even better. Certainly down the track when it came to when you're competing well in the playoffs and making a run at the titles too, which I'll get to in a little while. But just wanted to go back a little bit for a moment to your first Olympics back in 1984. I think you're only about 18 or 19 at the time. In LA.
I turned 19 during the games.
Oh, okay, there you go. So you turned that's incredible to be 19 at the Olympic Games, playing for your country. Overall, Australia finished 7th, I think, at that time, and you scored about 10 points a game or thereabouts in around 15 or 20 minutes a game. Now, your Boomers didn't face the gold medal winning USA at that time, which featured, of course, Michael Jordan and a whole stack of other future NBA players. But did you have any interaction with Team USA or watch any of their games from the stands throughout that tournament?
Oh, most definitely. We saw them a few times play, and unfortunately, the Olympic movement throughout the 70s was going through a real tough time. Cities were going broke hosting them. You had some tragedies along the way with Munich, and you had the boycotts in Moscow, and of course the tit-for-tat boycott where the Americans didn't go in Moscow, so a lot of the Europeans and the Soviet Union didn't go in '84. So the Olympic movement was going through some real tough times, and because of that, the Los Angeles Olympics, they changed it a little bit in order to try and help with the costs. They actually had two different Olympic villages. They had a village at UCLA and they had a village at USC.
Okay.
And the Australian team, we stayed at USC, but the United States team, they were staying at UCLA. So unlike it was prior to that and subsequent to that, where all the teams stay in the one village, we never got the opportunity to interact with many of the Americans because they were staying in a different location as far as the village is concerned. But we would go and we would have access to both villages. So I remember one time we went to the UCLA to have a look at their village compared to ours.
Yeah.
And we did see a lot of the American players, and the basketball community being what it is, you do say g'day. I don't think it was anything significant, but other than coming across the fellas and saying g'day, that type of stuff. So I wouldn't necessarily say that we became lifelong buddies with any of the players, but we did get to talk to them a little bit and share some time. And of course, back then, we got to meet Michael Jordan, but he wasn't Michael Jordan then. He was just this unbelievable college talent that everyone was projecting to be a superstar, but he certainly didn't have the same status and that he went on to earn. And it was not as if we thought, we're meeting perhaps the greatest basketball player ever to play the game at the time. So it didn't have that same sort of impact. It was a great experience, and fortunately for us, we had a pretty good Olympic Games campaign, and I got to learn a lot. I was playing behind Phil Smythe and Wayne Carroll were ahead of me. Damien Keogh was also on that team as one of the other guards. So it was, it was a great experience.
Yeah, great, no doubt. Now, I'd like to take a moment to discuss your relationship with some of the brightest stars who arrived on the scene here in Australia during the mid to late 1980s, and I'm talking about perhaps Luke Longley, Mark Bradkey, and Shane Heal, who are probably three of the most known players at that time. Do you mind just for a moment talking about your time playing together, representing Australia, and perhaps any insights into their off-court or even on-court personalities?
No, they're all different, and the thing about those three is they spent time together at the Institute of Sport. So they came through the ranks together, and they were very intimate as far as their relationship was concerned because they lived in each other's pockets for many years as youngsters coming through the ranks at the AIS, whereas I never attended the AIS, but coming together with the national team and you forge those bonds and certainly with all three of those guys who were bona fide superstars, got to know them and learn a lot about them and become very good friends. And they're all different. They all have different personalities. Luke's the sort of guy that, if to try and explain him, he's one of those guys that he never looked stressed or no matter what the circumstances is, you get the feeling that he's never ever going to die of a heart attack through worrying about anything because he just had this real laconic sort of casual approach to things. Mm-hmm. But having said that, still all of them fiercely competitive, whereas Mark Bradkey and Shane Heal are probably a lot more extroverted.
Yep.
I never found Luke to be a guy that absolutely loved the game. He was unbelievably talented and certainly enjoyed the camaraderie and the mateship and all those types of things.
Yep.
But, he was one of these guys that knew what it took to get the job done, was very, very professional about it, but never seemed to have this overwhelming, burning desire just a great determination to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
That may sound like a bit of a contradiction, but it's it's sort of the best way to describe it. And on the flip side of that, you have someone like Shane Heal who just fiercely competitive.
Yeah, no.
No matter what you're doing, whether it's playing a game of pool in the Olympic recreational centre, or you're playing 10-pin bowling, or you're playing for a medal at the Olympic Games, just fiercely competitive, and was someone who was able to extract every ounce of ability. He got the absolute very best out of himself because of that fierce determination to succeed and certainly take a backward step to no one, which we saw, I think, in a very famous incident with Charles Barkley prior to the 1996 Olympics. And Mark Bradke was sort of in between them both, in that very competitive, had a great zest for life and enjoyed the camaraderie and all other things that a risk taker off the court, but just an unbelievable athlete, 6'10", that could run with the guards and jump with the best of them, and just around the basket, just a rebounding freak. So strong. And 6'10", you think, gee, that's a big fella. But on the international stage, he was going up against guys that made him look small, but he was able to punch above his weight because of his strength. So they're all different and all had a very significant impact on the game. And Luke is one of those guys, I think, that here in Australia, as much recognition as he's got, people probably don't realise, or give him enough credit for what he did on the NBA stage. And most people, when you think of, ask the question of what's the greatest team ever to play the game, certainly in the conversation, and some would argue the best team ever was that period when Luke was playing with the Chicago Bulls alongside Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan, and he's the starting center on what many people would argue is the greatest basketball team ever put together. Is a remarkable achievement, and one that I think here in Australia we understand, the general sporting public understand that he was great, but I don't really think they know how great he was.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. I think he's achieved some amazing things, and to be on those three championship teams in the second three-peat of the Bulls there, and being the starting centre, just an incredible feat. I'd love to actually catch up and speak to him at some stage down the track about his time with the Bulls and the Boomers and all that sort of stuff. So if you can maybe put in a good word for each sometime, that'd be good.
He's more than happy to talk. He's a great fellow, Luke, and he would be more than happy to give you some time. There's no doubt about that. He loves to talk hoops and I'm sure he loves going over and reminiscing about some of the times he had with the Bulls and of course with the Boomers.
That'd be sensational. And I do plan to ask a question down the track as well to you about that Hammer versus Barkley run-in from the pre-Olympic game in 1996. So I'll get to that as well. So, but yeah, great insight there on a greater mix of personalities and obviously some incredibly talented players along the way there too. Just with the 1988 Olympic Games, Australia made it to the medal playoff round, and you faced the USA in a match-up for bronze. And the USA was anchored, pun intended, by your future Spurs teammate David Robinson, along with other soon-to-be NBA stars like Mitch Richmond and Danny Manning, Percy Hawkins, those sort of guys. What are your memories of that game, the playoff for bronze, and just your second Olympics in general? You were on court a lot more and obviously became an integral part of the Aussie team by that stage.
Yeah, it was a difficult challenge and one that the Americans were thinking they were going to go there and win the gold medal, of course. And the team they had, you mentioned that some of the players are just outstanding talent, and Dan Marley was another one, and Charles Smith, I think, was another one. So they had all the bases covered, and we had an outstanding tournament, and we beat Spain. In the history of Australian basketball, we'd never ever beaten Spain, and we were able to beat them in the quarterfinal game, which was just a remarkable game and one where we we weren't expected to win that and win that particular game, and we were able to get the win to advance. And we assumed that we'd probably be going to playing against the Soviet Union. But what happened is that Yugoslavia caused, the Soviet Union caused an upset in that they beat the United States in the semi-final game.
Mm.
So, and unfortunately for us, we lost against Russia, I think it was. So Russia played Yugoslavia in the final, and we were up against the United States, who, to Russia's credit, they did a fantastic job in being able to beat the United States, but it made the United States extremely angry.
No doubt.
I think it's one of those ones, if the Soviet Union played the United States 10 times, I reckon the United States would have won 8 of them.
Yep.
I think that they were, they just were too young, a little young and not ready for the circumstances. But the reality of it is that as good as the Soviet Union were with all the talent they have, I still think that the United States should have beat them. But in that particular game, when we then are now facing, we thought we were going to have another crack at Yugoslavia,
yep.
Or the Soviet Union, who we'd played the Soviet Union 5 games prior, and we lost to them one of the games in overtime when we played them in preparation for the Seoul Olympics here in Australia. So we're thinking, geez, if we get the Soviet Union again in the bronze medal game, we consider ourselves a remote chance.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it didn't go according to the script, and the Soviet Union won, and we had to face the United States, and we were never, ever in the game.
Mm.
They extended the defense. John Thompson, the coach of Georgetown, he was the head coach who was renowned for his defensive pressure, so they were full court presses the whole game, and we never were a chance. But despite losing that game and losing, by a fairly reasonable margin, we were still had just over the moon of making it through to have a chance to play off for a medal. And we lost. Our disappointment at losing that game was very short-lived because we reflected back on the Olympics in its entirety and were very, very proud of what we were able to do.
Yeah, no, at that time, I think that's still the equal best finishing for the Aussie Boomers at the Olympics ever, isn't it? Is that correct?
It is. First time that Australia ever played off for a medal, and ironically in the same games, the Opals also played off for a medal, and unfortunately they came up short as well. But it was the first time that the Australian team had ever done that, so we made a bit of history, and I think that it also it was a sort of a coming out party as far as the rest of the world is concerned to realise that we had some talent, and we're a very young team. Adrian Hurley, the coach, went for youth, selecting guys like Andrew Vlahoff and Luke Longley and Mark Bradkey in particular for those games. So it was a real coming out party for us, and it made the rest of the world sort of stand up and take note that we'd arrived on the international scene.
Yeah, no, definitely. Now, your Melbourne Tigers toured the USA back in 1986, following what you described in your book as a horrible NBL season. Whilst on that tour of the Big East schools, the Tigers played 8 games in 13 days, and you saved your best for last, dropping a lazy 46 points on Seton Hall. From that moment, the Pirates were keen to obtain your services for the upcoming or future NCAA seasons. Can you just recall your performance in that game that first got the attention from Seton Hall, and what actually happened to then land you on the roster to play for Seton Hall in 1988-89?
Yeah, well, we were playing that series. We're playing against, teams like Syracuse and Connecticut and Georgetown, all the major schools in the Big East Conference. Pittsburgh was very strong back then. And we started the tour with a loss. We played Boston College. And then the next game of the tour, I think we played against University of Connecticut. Now, Jim Calhoun, the famous coach, has on to win a couple of national titles at Connecticut. He was in his formative years of his time with Connecticut, and we beat him. We beat UConn, and I had a pretty decent game in that one as well. And when we played St. John's, is another team that's just up the road from Seton Hall, in New York, and I remember after the game, the coach of Seton Hall, PJ Carlissimo, was actually at our game against St. John's, and he came into the locker room afterwards and was talking to my dad because my dad knew PJ's dad, and he said g'day to me, but I didn't think anything of it, and we went on, continued on the tour, and then eventually got the chance to play against Seton Hall, and it was the last game of the tour, and as you mentioned, I was able to put up some points, and honestly, we were actually buggered because we played 8 games in 13 days, and we didn't fly to any one city. We were in these little vans driving around because we were poverty-stricken Tigers.
Oh, yep.
And, we were just buggered and just wrapped that the tour would finally end so we get some vacation time.
Mm-hmm.
And after that game, the coaching staff came to me and initially went to my dad, and my dad said, go for your life, talk to Andrew, it's really his decision. And they were trying to get me to stay on from then, absolutely not even go on a bit of a break with the team and start up. They said, I could start school in December, the middle of December, and enroll then, and I could join the team immediately.
Oh, okay.
And it was kind of a bit of a shock, and at the time, I was still keen on playing for Australia, and we had it was in '86, so we had the Seoul Olympics coming up, and I wanted to be a part of that, and I was playing for my dad with the Melbourne Tigers, so I was rapt that they considered me, but I said, oh no, not really interested. But the assistant coach of the team, John Carroll, he was persistent, so I turned him down then, and then the next season, the off season, they're calling me up, and I was saying no, got the Seoul Olympic Games coming up, but he was relentless. I shudder to think what his phone bill would have been, because they were literally calling me, once a week, every week. What are you doing? How are you going? And as much as I said no, it was like they wouldn't take no for an answer. And in all honesty, it was only because of the Seoul Olympic Games in '88, the NBL, they were going to be in the middle of the year. So the NBL actually started a lot earlier. Mm-hmm. So we're normally starting in March, April, that sort of period. But because of the '88 Olympics, we started earlier. But then in '89, it was going to go back to its regular spot. So it opened up this window where I could go to the Olympics, finish the Olympics, go play at Seton Hall, and then come back and continue to play with the Melbourne Tigers. And in all honesty, the major reason why I decided to go to Seton Hall was because they were so persistent, and I sort of like to say no all the time. But secondly, because of the Olympic Games, I was struggling to get through my schooling. I was missing so much school preparing for the Olympics that I thought, well, here's a chance to go over there, play a bit of basketball, have an experience, but also get 2 semesters of classes in that those credits to be transferred back to my course here. And if it wasn't for that, I would never have gone. And Seton Hall were predicted to finish, I think there's 9 teams in the Big East back 10. I think back then, and I think we were predicted to finish 7th or 8th in our conference, not the nation, in our conference. So pretty low expectations, and because that window of opportunity came and thought I could knock over some credits, I said, oh, yeah, why not? And sure enough, I was able to get some credits, but one of the most remarkable experiences of my life, just one of those things where you're in the right place at the right time, where the Seton Hall were a lot better than the tipsters and the pre-season polls had us at, and we went on to play off for a national championship and lost in overtime to University of Michigan in what is regarded as, by many, as one of the most memorable games in college history. So it was just an incredible set of circumstances that enabled me to have that experience.
Very much so. Now, so Seton Hall, that year that you did join them, they went 31-7. Along the way, you were named MVP of the Sugar Bowl tournament. Now, just prior to that tournament, you'd actually contemplated returning back to Australia.
Yeah, it was a difficult time. I'd been playing a lot. I'd been playing the NBL season, then straight in the Olympic Games campaign, then straight back into Seton Hall. And, trying to establish my role on the team was difficult because the team was a lot better than predicted, and they had some great players on there. In fact, Ramon Ramos, who was one of the real major players for Puerto Rico, who I'd played against at the Olympics. He was on the team, and they had John Morton, Gerard Green, Darryl Walker, a veteran group that was coming through that just outstanding talent. And, I'd come through primarily as a guard and, where I was a prominent member of the team and relied on to score a lot. All those things were there for me. And, trying to take on a new role and do those things and just the fatigue of the workload, all those things was starting to get to me. And I'm thinking, is this really going to be helpful for me in the long run? And you start to second guess yourself. But fortunately I stuck it out. Yeah. And, and at that time, my mum and my dad and my sister came over to visit for the Christmas period, and they came to New Orleans for the Sugar Bowl tournament. I had a pretty decent tournament, and we did well. And after that, it sort of everything fell into place. And by the end of it, I didn't want to come home. I was having a great time and really enjoying it and playing a different role. It wasn't like I was coming out there getting 15, 20 shots a game.
Yeah.
I was only getting sort of 7 or 8 shots a game, playing my role as a forward, doing things a little bit differently, and it was a great learning experience as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, it's incredible to think, as we were saying, that in your one season at Seton Hall, so many things had to fall into the correct place for your team to even get to the tournament and then get to the Sweet 16, the Final Four, and then the championship game. Can you just reflect back for a moment on the championship game itself, where you were matching up against Glenn Rice at times as well? How was that?
It was interesting. You don't get a lot of time. We played against Duke in the semi-final, and you get a day off, and then the finals on the Monday. So we played on the Saturday. You have the Sunday off, where we prepared for the game against Michigan, and then we played on the Monday. And Glenn Rice was a superstar. He prolific scorer, big guy. 6'7", 6'8". He was the main man of Michigan, and I was given a defensive assignment, which I guess many people would say that I failed because he had an outstanding game. He had 30. It was 30 plus. I can't remember exactly what he scored, but he had over 30. And we were trying a whole different lot of ways to guard him, but he was just having one of those games. And for me, I'd had a good tournament, and I guess your success along the way, you're getting scrutinised, particularly throughout the tournament. The whole nation is focusing on just a few teams. And in the regional finals where we played against UNLV, Indiana and UNLV, I was actually awarded MVP of the Western region. That was the region we were in. So, and then against Duke, I had 20 against Duke, and Michigan, although they didn't have a lot of time prepared, they certainly were making life difficult for me.
Yeah.
And I can't exactly remember. I think I had 5 points in the game, and I would have only had I might have had, from recollection, 5 or 6 shots in the game, and I hit a 3. The game went into overtime, and I made a 3 in overtime. But outside of that, I think I knocked down a couple of free throws, and that's about it. So, I played a lot, and it wasn't like I'd look back on it and say that was one of my worst games, because those types of games were not uncommon throughout the season. I had many games where I was, getting 4 or 6, and because that was, it was my role. I wasn't have the same role that I was normally accustomed to playing for the national team or playing for the Tigers. So it was just a different role, and you do the best with the role that you've been given.
Yeah, no, sure. After your time at Seton Hall, you had some interest from multiple NBA teams. However, it was a phone call from the then Seattle coach, Bernie Bickerstaff, who's now with the Lakers, as an assistant, that led to you attending their veterans tryout camp.
Yeah, I was pretty, set. I was happy with the Melbourne Tigers. I was loving what I was doing with the Boomers, and life couldn't have been better. And I had some invitations to go to a number of camp. The 76ers were one of them. I think the Boston Celtics had made an inquiry. There was a number of inquiries to come and try out, and I was rapt when you get the letter in the mail, because unlike it is today with the email and the means of communication, I remember coming home one day. I was still trying to get through university, and to see a letter addressed to you, and on the letter it's got the Sixers logo or the Celtics logo. You're thinking it's got your name on the front of it. You're pretty anxious to open those things up. But but I was realistic about it all, and and I look back on it now, I probably wish that perhaps I had a bit more motivation to actually pursue it more aggressively. But I was pretty realistic about it all, and didn't really think it was going to be a realistic chance. And with the Sixers and the Celtics and that, and I actually politely declined and said, "Oh no, I've got too much on, unless there's something guaranteed, and you're going to be a part of the team." I didn't think that going into that environment was going to be my best option. But the Seattle Supersonics, they were a bit more aggressive. They sent the letter, but then they had the coach of the team call me up, and and really encouraged me to come and be involved. And they were keen to have a good look at me, and I thought, oh well, I'll give it a go. So I went and tried out with them and went the distance. And although I never made the team, cut, as most people say, last cut on the NBA roster, but it was a few days before the regular season opened, so I got the chance at the very least to go through the entire pre-season experience. And although I never made the team, it was it was a real eye opener, and I learned a lot about it. And I think that it really did help my game, the development of the game. Yeah, sure.
Now on that Sonics team at the time, there was a rookie, Sean Kemp. You had X-Man, Xavier McDaniel, Dale Ellis, Sadale Threatt, the Australian-based now Sadale Threatt, and a future teammate of yours, Avery Johnson, as well.
Yeah, Avery was in, and Avery was being bounced around. Avery was another one that, he was on the team and had a guaranteed contract, but he was very low on the pecking order at the time. He was still trying to find his way in the league as well. So, it was, to spend some time with those guys and see how they go about it, and just the sheer athleticism of it all. I remember Sean Kemp. I mean, he was this young fella straight out of high school. Well, actually, not out of high. I think he was had been at a junior. I think. Pardon me?
Was he signed up by Kentucky but never actually played for them?
Yeah, and I think he actually went and was sat out a year at a junior college. He might not. I don't know if he actually ever played, but he was only still a very young man, 19, 20 years of age.
Yeah.
And the stuff that he came in, this young bull that just even the veterans, Olden Polynice was one of the big guys, and have this guy 6'10", the way he ran the floor and just the athleticism of the man. He was raw, and he was just, you could tell that he's making a lot of mistakes, but just the sheer athleticism of him was unbelievable. And, he was, him, Dana Burrows was another guy who played at Boston College that had been drafted by Seattle as well. Being the new guys coming in, got to spend some time with them and hang out with them a little bit, and like I said, learn a little bit from them.
Yeah, no doubt. If we had all day, I'd love to delve into your experiences about playing in Europe, plus chatting about many key Olympic Games battles that you're involved in. But however, I realise your time's very precious and we simply can't cover everything. There's an indelible image of you hugging your dad, Lindsay, after you won the 1993 NBL Championship. Some people say that you were probably strangling him at the time.
Yeah.
Your Tigers, against the odds, you defeated a really stacked Perth Wildcats team for the title in Perth, and it was your first ever win against Perth on their home floor. Now, do you mind just describing the feeling of winning that first NBL title, playing for the club that you literally grew up with, that was also coached by your dad?
Yeah, it was remarkable, and I still always feel indebted to the club and the opportunities that I had, and And like I said, I think it makes it more special having gone through the hardship in order to get into the NBL and what we had to suffer through in order to survive. I think makes those experiences even greater. And, you know, the impact that my dad has had on me, and to share that experience with your dad in that type of environment is just something very, very special. And at the time, the feelings are so unique. It's not something that you can really necessarily accurately describe what internally you're going through. But not only was the excitement for myself, but also for my dad and his contribution, and to get to a stage where he'd suffered a lot as well, with very competitive instinct and the hardship you go through to get to those points to finally reach the pinnacle in that pretty adverse situation. It was an unbelievable experience, and probably even more so now as I've gone on through various stages of my life, and I've had kids, and I've got 4 kids of my own, 3 daughters and a son. You get a greater appreciation for having those times to spend with your kids. And I think, at the time I was excited and emotional because of the sporting and basketball experience. But as I've gone back on and looking at it now in retrospect, it's also a remarkable father-son experience, which wasn't necessarily the way I was feeling at the time. It was more, he's the coach, he's the guy that's helped me, teach me the game, all those types of things. So you're excited in that sense. And it probably wasn't until later on to have that time to share with your dad and have those goals collectively and go through it. Just something that, meant so much to me. And I guess the emotion of the situation was pretty significant at the time, but probably just as significant now as it was at the time.
Don't touch a thing, yells out Gaze. Vlahov to 2. And the Tigers, for the first time in history, have won the NBL title. Look at the Gaze family. Lindsay and Andrew. Andrew just tears streaming down the face. Something they've wanted so badly for so long.
Now, in early 1994, the Washington Bullets were plagued by injury problems, and they reached out to you with an opportunity to join their team. You played with some interesting teammates, including 2 of my favourite players of that era, Kenny Skywalker and the boy wonder, King Rex Chapman. And also other players like Never Nervous, Purvis Allison, and the Duck, Kevin Duckworth. It sounds like it's more of an all-nickname team than anything, but... and
Gitza.
Oh, yeah, little George.
Big Georgie Mirison, who went on to not only be a basketballer, but dabble in the area of acting as well.
That's right, that Billy Crystal movie. I do recall that. Now, what were your impressions of that Bullets team during your time with them? You had a few 10-day contracts at the time. Obviously, you were short on numbers, and sometimes you only suited up about 8 players. So what did you think about that time?
Well, it was a tremendous experience for me because I got an NBA experience. I got to play against NBA players, or albeit not necessarily a lot, but enough of an opportunity where I actually got on the court and competed to have a genuine NBA experience. And they were great guys. Another one, that superstar on the team was Tom Gugliotta.
Yeah, true.
But Rex Chapman and certainly Kenny Walker, they were all very welcoming, and it's not the same sort of spirit you have here in Australia. There's very much more of a commercial or more professional attitude to the way they go about it. But they were great guys, very welcoming, made it easy for me, joking around, certainly happy to take the mickey out of me and anything I had to do or offer. But, they were fantastic. And Rex, again, the thing that stuck out the most was just the athleticism of these guys. I mean, Kenny Walker and Rex Chapman, I remember the first game we played, and the layup line in the warm-up was something like, my goodness, I mean, this is it's almost embarrassing, the athleticism on display. But it was probably a little difficult because the season was done. You know, they weren't going to make the playoffs. And I think in that environment where, you know, guys are thinking about their futures and the individual elements of it all, those types of things make for probably a slightly different experience than what it would be if you're on a team that's still in control of their destiny and trying to make the playoffs. It was, you know, they're different sets of circumstances, and it's probably a natural thing that the way in which the individuals confront those different circumstances are going to be different. But the biggest thing about it for me is whether or not I was going to get another opportunity in the NBA or not. In my own mind, regardless of what anyone else said, in my own mind, I think it gave me some peace of mind, because you always wonder about the NBA and whether or not you can compete or whether or not you're good enough. And although the statistics or the opportunity, if people look back on and say, well, you know, you didn't, you know, not really a lot to gloat about, but it certainly gave me peace of mind in my understanding of my abilities and whether or not, you know, you're capable of competing at that level.
Yeah, I can totally understand where you're coming from there. And I'll get to your time with the San Antonio Spurs in a little while. Now, in a pre-Olympics exhibition game in 1996, as we talked about briefly before, your Boomers played Team USA. Shane, the Hammer Heel, was hitting shots from all over the court. He's hit 8 threes, and he just had people, John Stockton and whoever else, they were just hanging off his face, and he was just drilling shots left, right and centre. But the game was overshadowed by the Charles Barkley contact on Shane Hill. But also prior to that incident, Andrew Vlahoff and Karl Malone were also exchanging words, and then you attempted to be the peacemaker, but it seemed to rile Karl Malone even further. Looking back, can you just describe your thoughts on that game?
Yeah, it was interesting because I still remember the look on Karl Malone, because, you know, here in Australia, or when you're in the international arena and people know who you are, and you know, the way in which you interact with your opposition is such that you go in there and you can often be the peacemaker, and you can talk and communicate, and you've got that respect that's just there because of the history. Going into this situation, it's fair to say Karl Malone had no idea who Andrew Gaze was, and certainly had no idea who Andrew Vlahoff or any of the guys were. So it was there was a little bit of toing and froing going, and Andrew Vlahoff was engaged with a conversation with Karl Malone, and I sort of went in there to be peacemaker. He gave me a look that just said, you know, you're in the wrong place here, young man. Just this is not Vlahoff, because of his size, could probably just gain a modicum more respect in a confrontation than what I would. But that happened, and then of course following we had the incident with Charles Barkley and Shane Hill, and Shane had one of the all-time greats in great games in Australian uniform. It was just a remarkable performance. The shooting display was incredible.
Oh, yeah.
And all added spice when Charles, you know, not knowing who Shane was, you know, Shane's shooting technique is very different, and he kicks his legs out. And Charles was running by because Hammer was hot and running by, and Shane kicks his legs out. And I don't think Charles necessarily was going there to intentionally take out Shane's legs, but he was certainly running at him and trying to put him off his shot. But Shane, naturally, he gets his legs taken out, falls on his backside, and he bounces up, and he doesn't know what's going on. And he does what I think he was taught during his days growing up in Lilydale or wherever it was, and he wasn't just going to cop that laying down, and he gave him a little hip and shoulder. And you can see, if you ever get to see, you probably see it on YouTube, if you ever get to see it, you can almost see Charles Barkley thinking, like, I think he was more shocked at the little hip and shoulder that Hammer was in, and Hammer was giving him a mouthful. And it was backwards and forwards. You're thinking, oh, gee, what's going to happen here? And the refs are sort of trying to take control. And the timeout was called, and they had to cross paths again, and as they crossed paths, Karl Malone was in there, Charles was in there, and they were trying to fly the flag, and I went in there to fly the flag for Hammer. Still remember going in there and putting a hand on Karl Malone, and as I touched him, I don't know what it was, the synapses that run through your arm that send messages to your brain, instantaneously I knew that this is, I'm in the wrong spot, and what am I doing here? I could offer very, very little support for Shane, but I remember at the time, because I was roommates with Shane throughout our entire Australian time with the Boomers.
Yeah.
And, he's been engaged in some physical altercations, whereas I've never been engaged in that type of activity. But I remember him when we always used to muck around, he'd talk about some of the experiences, he always used to tell me, mate, you got to make sure you get the first one. Even if you're going down, make sure you get one in, and the best way to do that is get the first one in. So that in the back of my head, and then seeing him engaged in this confrontation, and he's got his fist cocked, ready to throw one, I'm thinking, he's going to throw one here. He's stuck rolling, he's getting all emotional about it all. And fortunately, things sort of got dispersed, and I encouraged him enormously to let go and come back to the timeout. I don't know whether it was whether he actually listened to me or it's just the way it unfolded, but I knew I could offer very, very little assistance in those circumstances.
Oh, for sure. Now, that game was broadcast here in Australia as well, and just as that sort of fracas was happening that you're talking about with that timeout, I went to the ad break, and I had no idea what was going on. I was thinking, surely you can't take an ad break now. It's all pushing and shoving and words being exchanged, so it's good to hear a bit more about what actually took place at that time.
Well, the thing about it is straight after the game, Charles Barkley and the entire USA team were fantastic. They shook our hands, and if anything, we probably gained a bit of respect for the way in which we went about it, because whether it was Andrew Blahoff or Shane Heal or whoever it was, and, they pumped us. They would have beaten us close to 40, but we didn't take any backward steps, We were just playing them, and although we had tremendous respect for them, we weren't going to just go bow to and be submissive under any circumstances. So, I think in hindsight, we earn a lot of respect for that particular game, and I think in all honesty, it was the catalyst for Shane getting an opportunity to play with the Minnesota Timberwolves in the NBA.
Yeah, sure, because he put on an incredible shooting performance, just hitting all those shots from so deep out from the basket as well. Now, a few weeks later, you faced the same USA team, this time in a much more serious setting in the semi-finals at the Olympics.
Yeah.
The Boomers had a great first half, and you were trailing by single digits until there was a last-second dunk, I think, from Karl Malone to end that first half. You yourself were on fire. You had about 21 points at the time, but Fortunately you were overrun in the second half. Do you mind just talking a little bit about that game and also some of the chatter that was happening towards the end between yourself and Reggie Miller and a few others?
Yeah, well, there's a bit going on, and again, we were taking it right up to him in the first half, and I think, in all honesty, we were surprising ourselves. We were having a fantastic Olympic Games campaign. We'd just come off an unbelievable win over Croatia in order to get to the semi-final game, and it's just unfortunate way of the draw is that we had to play the United States in the in that semi-final game. If the system had been a little bit different, we could have been playing against Lithuania, depending on where we'd finished in that semi-final game. And we'd beaten Greece by 30 or 40 in the game. We'd beaten Brazil, we'd beaten Croatia. We were just having, in fact, in hindsight, of all our Olympic games, that was the best performed team or campaign we'd had that I was involved in.
Sure.
And, in this game, in the first half, I was fortunate enough to be able to knock down some shots, and I earned a lot. I know I went to the free throw line a lot as well, and, through it, we were going about it, and I was guarding Reggie Miller as well, and one time I accidentally hit him in the head, and I said, sorry, mate, and he sort of was a bit angry, and I said, mate, I'm sorry, Reggie, I didn't, said it to him twice. And I remember Shane come up to me and, using language that's inappropriate to be using now, but basically told me to shut up. You've apologised once. If he doesn't want to take your apology, and he's ripped into Reggie for saying that. So it was, in the second half, because I'd done, hit some shots in the first half, their defensive intensity had picked right up, and Reggie Miller was telling me that I don't know, I couldn't quite understand at the time, but saying he was putting a cork in my ass, saying that he's going to stop me now. I don't know. Still to this day, I don't understand. Maybe that was something, the way they go about it, but it was a way of him saying that he was going to shut me down, and fair to say he did a pretty decent job of it. He fouled me one time. I think in the second half, I think I might have had one field goal, but I think most of them came from the free throw line. And I remember I went to the free throw line, and he was just giving it to me, telling me that's the only way I was going to score for the rest of the game was from the free throw line, just going off on me. But the same thing, it's all just the difference is the way, the competitive nature of it all, because as soon as the game finished, they shake your hand, they're happy to have a chat, and it's a completely different demeanour about it all. But in the cut and thrust of the competition, pretty aggressive.
Yeah, sure. Now, the 1997 NBL season, your Tigers started off the season with a bit shaky, off to a 3-9 start, and then you rolled off an incredible win streak, about 16 straight victories, before you met your arch rivals in the Championship Series, the Southeast Melbourne Magic. Now, do you mind just explaining perhaps some of the emotions of going through that win streak, and perhaps even when you got to the finals, to get your second NBL championship?
Yeah, it was a fantastic season because it had such extremes. Starting off the season 3-9. In actual fact, we should have been 4-8. But what happened was we actually won a game. We beat the Adelaide 36ers, but we started the season without Mark Bradkey. And we also had another guy called Jarvis Lang. Yep. And Jarvis was our new import who just replaced Dave Simmons, and he was a very good player, but was having problems with his knee, and Mark was a late arrival coming back from a stint with the Philadelphia 76ers. So it was a horrendous start to the season, and the critics were out, fire the coach, no good, all those types of things, and we were 3-9. And then just through a quirky set of circumstances, got the chance to pick up Marcus Timmins, who had just played the previous season with Wollongong Hawks. Mm-hmm. And literally, this is the way the fickle hand of fate can work, was that I was talking to Brett Brown, who was the coach of the Giants at the time, and they were playing against the Wollongong Hawks. And Marcus wasn't with the Hawks, but had come back to visit his girlfriend, I believe it was. And as I was talking to Brett Brown, he actually said to me, he said, "Oh, who's just walked? Marcus Timmins has just walked by. Now, here's a player that you guys should consider." And I thought, I said, "What's he doing here?" He goes, "I don't know. He's here." And I said, "Mate, is there any chance you could just have a chat to him and see what he's doing?" So he went up and had a chat to him, and he called me back. And he said, "Oh, he's in town. He's been playing in Europe. He's available." So I then spoke to my dad and the management of the Tigers. I said, "You know what? We've got no one. He's there." And we're thinking, "Oh, yeah, worth a chance." So they called him up and said, "Oh, will you come down?" And we didn't even sign it. We just said, "Can you come down and have a practice session? And, we might want to pick you up for the season." And he was like, yeah, sure, I'm here anyway. So, 2 days later, he's on a plane. He came down, and I reckon literally after the first 20 minutes of the training session, we said, "Let's sign him."
Yeah, no doubt.
So we picked him up, and he was a big part of us being transformed. That, along with getting Mark Bradkey back into the lineup, and just our season coming together, and ended up being an unbelievable season where we went through. I think we won 16 or 17 in a row. Won the game. We played the Giants, and that's what Brett always used to say. He goes, "Mate, I got you this player, Marcus Timmins." We played them in the semi-final, and we beat them in 2 straight games. And and then we had to play against the Magic in the final. And, of course, we were able to get over the top of them. But we'd won 16 or 17 in a row, one game won by a record margin. I think we won by 30-odd, 35 even, 36. And then, of course, in game 2, in a remarkable turnaround, they got the better of us in a low-scoring game. It might have been, you're testing my memory here, but in the 70s, maybe the 80s, which was not our style. And then, fortunately for us, in game 3, we were able to regroup and get the win. But it was a difficult time because we were faced with the prospect of being regarded as the greatest chokers in the history of the game if we weren't able to win that game 3. But fortunately, we were able to get over the line, and it sort of rounded off my experiences because we'd won a championship in '93.
Yep.
But this was a chance to win one on home soil and in front of our home fans, in front of 15,000 people at the tennis centre, and it was just a fantastic experience.
Yeah, those years of the NBL in the early to mid '90s and a little bit up beyond were just fantastic, and it's hopefully they'll get back there pretty soon too. They're already well on their way. Now, during your championship years and beyond, you shared a special chemistry with your teammate Leonard Copeland. If I had a dollar for every time I heard Stephen Quartermain say, or Dean Tillman say, "Alley-oop to Copeland," I'd be able to retire. So can you just quickly talk about Leonard and just the impact he made on you personally and Australian basketball in general?
Leonard Copeland is one of the great guys. He is a good friend of mine, and he was one of the prime reasons why I was able to achieve my goal and being a part of a championship-winning team. He was a big, important piece of that puzzle. And not only did he transform our team and take us to the promised land, so to speak, but I think he also had a profound impact on the league. He was the first player, there'd been great athletes come out, James Crawford and, a host of others of just unbelievable athletes. But Leonard at 6'5", 6'6", just did things that many players weren't able to do. Just had a gift of athleticism. And coming together with the combination of my skills and his skills where, all I had to do was throw it anywhere near the rim, and to develop that rapport with another individual where you've just got almost a telepathic sense to know where someone's going to be, and the camaraderie we're able to develop in the alley-oop play and other aspects of the game as well, and the way I think we helped each other out was just it was just a privilege to play alongside the man. He's just had a long career in the NBL, had a significant impact on the competition, and I've been very lucky that not only is he a superstar player, but he's equally good bloke as well. So he's and loves his country and still lives here, and still happy to call him one of my closest friends.
Yeah, no, for sure. Now, I reminisced last night and had a look on YouTube at some of the Tigers highlights over the years, and then saw there was a package of plays where it's just pretty much all alley-oops from you to Leonard, and it's just fantastic to see 3 or 4 minutes worth of just plays where you're setting each other up, but mainly just throwing up massive alley-oops for him to slam through.
A lot of it was, and it's one of the things that I think where very little of the credit goes, in fact none of the credit goes, but is a significant part of it was with my dad as the coach. A lot of those opportunities don't happen randomly; they happen by design. And not only was it important for us as part of our strategy in order to get those types of plays going, but I think my dad also had a strong sense of obligation to the entertainment value of the game.
Yeah.
And many coaches, with some of the things that we did, you got to take the good with the bad. And quite often, perhaps less or more conservative coaches wouldn't allow you to do those types of things. So I think that he gets no credit for that particular element of what Leonard and I did, but in all honesty, it had a lot to do with coaching. It had just as much to do with coaching as it did Leonard and I using our skills.
Yeah, well, it was a fantastic athletic style of play, and it was definitely very welcomed by the fans too. Now, at the age of 33, you return back to the NBA with the San Antonio Spurs. Can you just talk about the welcome that you received from David Robinson on that first day of practice? You mentioned it in your book there, and I found it really interesting, given your history against him in the past. How was he on that first day?
Well, the thing about it is I was just astounded that he even knew my name. And I remember coming in and, he's one of the greatest players ever to play the game.
For sure.
And you're walking into the San Antonio training facility and meeting him for the first time, and him coming up and introducing himself and knowing my name, it was like one of the greatest moments of my life. I couldn't believe it. But, that whole experience is one that it's like Chinese whispers that sometimes gets blown out of proportion, or the story, gets told differently and becomes something that really wasn't. But my time with San Antonio was, I was grateful for the opportunity and had an incredible experience, and one of the most memorable times of my life. But the reality of it is, I look back and in many sense feel like a bit of a parasite that just was hanging on sort of there and got to enjoy that experience. My role with the team, was as close to non-existent as you possibly come. But nevertheless, you go in there and you do your best, and I was fortunate again to be in the right place at the right time and have just an amazing experience. But the thing about it is Greg Popovich, he loves the veterans. He loves guys that have been around and puts a lot of weight on experience and character and buying into a system, those types of things. So through good fortune, somehow or other, in 1998 World Championships, where I certainly didn't have one of my better international campaigns, he saw a little something in me and gave me that opportunity, for which I'm forever indebted.
For sure, definitely. Now, Steve Kerr is another one of my all-time favourite players, particularly given he played on the Bulls, and I'm such a big fan of the Bulls in that whole Jordan era. Yeah. He obviously was the crucial role in Game 6 of the 1997 NBA Finals when he hit the game shot.
Yep.
Are you able to perhaps just talk about being a teammate of Steve on that Spurs team, and also the relationship that you enjoy with him?
Yeah, and still do. He's another guy that I've kept a little bit of contact with, and he's just a guy that you look at, you think he's 6'3", not particularly quick, pasty white guy that you'd easily pass him over as the ball boy if you didn't know who he was. But highly competitive. He looks like this mild, meek sort of guy that you look at and you're thinking, oh, what a nice guy. And he is. He's a genuine nice guy, but unbelievably competitive.
Yep.
And fiercely committed and a real high work ethic. And when you've got his physical limitations, that's what it's going to take in order to find your way on an NBA roster. And he had a skill and he played a role and he played it beautifully both at San Antonio and with the Chicago Bulls, and has gone on to be, 5 NBA championship rings. I think that is nothing short of remarkable. And sure, there's a lot of good luck along the way, but more importantly, there's commitment and work ethic and all those things that he's deserved every ounce of success that he's been able to achieve. And I got to know him really well, and he loves golf as well. So after most practice sessions, we have our President's Cup going where we play one-on-one.
Yeah.
President's Cup. And yeah, it was, all the team, all the guys on the Spurs team, they were veterans, they fiercely competitive, but, I don't think they had the same ego or carried on with the same bravado as a lot of the other superstars that you still see in the NBA.
Yeah.
Very humble and just guys that high character guys that really bought into a system and really embraced the team ethics.
Yeah, sure. Now, one more Spurs question for you, Andrew. Do you mind just filling us in about a certain parcel that you received in the post some months after your return back to Australia once you finished your time with the Spurs? This is
probably 6 weeks, 8 weeks after coming back, and I get this notification in the letterbox, oh, you've got to come round and pick up this parcel. So I go in there to pick up the parcel, and the lady says, in order to pick up the parcel, it's going to cost you $900. Thinking, $900? What are you talking about? How is it? Is it a COD? I haven't ordered anything. And they said, it's a customs duty thing. It's an international parcel, and you got to pay $900. And I'm like, who's sending me the parcel? And they said, I don't know. And so they go at the back and they get the parcel and they have a look and they come back to me and they said, it's from a Mr. David Robinson. Thinking, what am I going to pay $900? I said, it's probably a gift or something. He's sending me something. They said, well, it's unless you pay the $900, what happens is it gets returned to sender. And I said, is there any chance you can open it up and find out what's in it? I don't know what's in it. You had no idea. And they said, oh, no, we're not supposed to do that. And I said, well, I don't know. And then the lady eventually said, oh, okay, well, I'll go out and I'll cut a slit in and I'll have a look. And she opens it up and she comes back and she says, oh, there's a piece of jewellery in there. And I'm thinking, oh, crikey, what's going on here? And I thought, well, I'd be too embarrassed to send it home, so send it back. So I paid the $900 and in it was a letter from David Robertson just thanking me for the season and just talking about what a great time he had, and was this as a gift in memory of the season, was this watch, and it's this some sort of watch. I'm not into it. He had a watch fetish. He loved watches. And, it was this watch that he had engraved on it, 99 champs, thanks for the memories, or something like that. And it had this astronomical value. And because the value was so high, that's why I had to pay the duty. So it was more than happy to pay it, mind you, from what it was. But it was just one of those funny things when you don't know, and no one, he never told. He never said that it was coming, or just out of the blue, it just arrived. So it was. I've never actually worn the watch. It's more of a trophy for me, but it's a great piece of memorabilia for me.
It's a fantastic story, that one. I'm sure you've been asked about 1 million times about carrying the Australian flag around the Olympic Stadium at Sydney 2000. In your book, there's a great account, though, of what happened while all the athletes and officials were waiting to be called over to the main stadium. Can you just describe that moment, perhaps, when your emotions were truly tested by the response of your fellow Australian athletes?
Yeah, it was. We actually watched the opening ceremony in stadium in the I think it was stadium. I don't know. I forget what they call it. ACER Arena, they call it now. It's the indoor stadium right there. That's right next door to the main stadium, and it holds about 20,000. And what happens is all the countries come in, and we watch the opening ceremony, all the activities and stuff, on the jumbo screen. We had no sound, but we could see all the goings on, and all the nations sit with each other in this arena and are watching the Olympics, waiting to go over to march in the opening ceremony. And you're there a long time, and we're sitting around, and everyone's getting nervous, and there's a lot of activities by each of the nations doing various chants and stuff to try and occupy your time, because you're there it's a good 3 hours sort of thing.
Right.
And eventually, it comes over the announcement, would Greece please proceed to the concourse area to prepare to march in the opening ceremony? And Greece, of course, being the founders, they go first, and then it goes in alphabetical order, followed by the host nation comes out last. So we're waiting around, sitting around while all these nations go, and there's another hour and a half, and eventually it comes up. Would Australia prepare, head to the concourse area, get ready for the walk of, 300 or 400 metres over to the to Stadium Australia. And what happened is when we assembled in the concourse area, we were right up the back. That is my basketball teammates. because you're supposed to go in relative order of height. Back then, it was women at supposed to go first, and then men at the rear, and you go in relative order of height. And because the basketballers are the big guys, we were right at the back. So I was there, and I shook all of my teammates' hands and wished them well for the march in the opening ceremony. And I had to make my way up to the front. So I was like, see you later, boys. I'm up the front of the bus. And as I turned to walk and to make my way to up the front to get the flag and lead the team over, it was a big Australian team on home soil. So it was probably about 400 or 500 individual athletes and administrators. And as I've done that, as I'm walking through them, it's like it started all this big clapping and cheering. And it was almost like a parting of the Red Sea where the athletes moved aside and there was like this alleyway for me to walk up to the front. And as I'm walking up, I'm high-fiving and slapping everyone's hand as I'm making my way through the Australian team. And, to be honoured in that way, the most, successful athletes this country can produce, being in this environment, being recognised that, and hearing them cheer and scream and carry on as I made my way through them all to go to the front to take the Australian flag, to walk over, and then, of course, introduce Australia to the world for in the opening ceremony is actually more memorable and more significant, that moment for me, than it was stepping foot out in front of 120,000 people and waving the flag around to sort of be recognised in that way by the other athletes and your peers was just a real buzz and a memorable thing that meant a lot to me.
Yeah, no doubt. That's an amazing experience and a great recollection for you to have. Now, moving on, I have to get quickly through these questions to let you go. You've been so generous with your time, so thank you again. The Boomers went on to finish 4th overall at those 2000 games, which again equaled the best ever placing at an Olympics for the men's team. Now, with the advent of the excellent NBL TV and the regular free-to-air broadcasts, do you believe that the NBL can one day, hopefully one day soon, rise up to those historic heights that it experienced during the 1990s and your playing days?
Well, we hope so. I think that's everyone's doing their absolutely very best to try and get to that. I'm of the opinion, I still think there needs to be some significant reforms go on for the NBL in order to get it back on the path. But I think those reforms are a work in progress. We've already seen some changes, and unfortunately there's been some difficult times, and we've lost a number of teams along the journey. We are at a pretty critical phase. There's some real good things happening now with Channel 10 and, of course, with NBL TV, and the way in which the people can access the sport has been fantastic. I think numbers are up, attendances are up. People subscribing, getting the opportunity to experience the NBL are increasing. But ultimately, the model, the revenue model, has to work. It's got to be financially viable for teams, and I think that we've got to find ways to generate more revenue. And in the interim, while we're doing that, there may need to be some further adjustments to the cost of clubs. So it's a difficult circumstances. We're very fortunate that the NBL right now, most of the teams are owned by successful entrepreneurial individuals that are investing a lot of time and resources into the game. Mm-hmm. And, we're hopeful that we can continue to grow the game and their investment is not going to be in vain. So, there are some really, really good things happening, but there's a lot of work to be done. And in my personal opinion, is that there probably still needs to be further reforms in order to grow the game.
Yeah, well, let's just hope that it does get the recognition it deserves here in Australia, because it's a fantastic product, and we just hope that it goes from strength to strength. Now, just before we end our conversation, Andrew, would you like to maybe just keep I'll let people know what you're up to these days. And I know you're involved in many different things, including the NBL itself. You have your own podcast with Grantley Bernard as well, and on SEN. What sort of stuff do you get up to these days?
I do a bit of media work. I'm commentating the games as well, doing some of the games with Channel 10 and One, I should say, because it's also on One on Friday nights.
Yes.
I'm doing I do that stuff with Grantley Bernard. We have a bit of fun with it, and that's for the NBL. The NBL put that podcast together, and we just come in there and try. We provide the content, of course. Yep. Grantley does most of the work, and we come in there and just get the opportunity to talk some hoops. So that's a bit of fun. And then I do sort of a semi-permanent type role with SEN in Melbourne on the radio 1116 SEN. And from a basketball perspective, I'm coaching at the junior ranks, and I also have done some coaching since retiring. Each year I take some teams to China with some of our NBL players, virtually just all-star teams, either SEABL players or state league players from around the country, or NBL players, and put together a tour, and I coach that team every year, and coaching at the junior ranks with the Melbourne Tigers youth league team as well. So that's how I still play on a Monday night in the domestic competition here in Melbourne.
Excellent.
Very, very slowly. And I'm also on the board of Basketball Australia, trying to help out there as well. So pretty active, plenty on, but it's generally good fun, and hopefully it's a way of giving back a little bit and repaying some of the tremendous experiences and opportunities that I've received out of the great game.
Yep, no, you're a very, very busy man, and I know I'm holding you up right now from actually attending one of your coaching commitments, so I better let you go. But thank you very much for chatting with me today. People can keep in touch with you on Twitter at AndrewGaze10, and thank you very much for chatting with me. It's been a fantastic experience.
No, good on you, Adam, and good luck. Keep up the good work, mate. I'll tune in and look forward to hearing others that you get to do a podcast with.
That's very kind of you. Thank you. And
no worries, mate.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show, and share my web address with your friends and colleagues, inallairness.com. Check out the podcast archive for plenty more episodes with high-profile guests. Follow me on Twitter at inallairness. Please visit the show's social hub, facebook.com/inallairness. Join me next time for another edition of the show.